Margaret, I just want to say I hope the book has been selling. I have certainly been pushing it because I've read it and I have been changed by it because I thought I knew the presidents because I told you that big compendium I had read before,
Yeah.
but it's like, okay, there you have it.
Yep.
Margaret, I just want to say I hope the book has been.
That is proof that we are live on YouTube and ready to start. And we want to share that. We want one other thing to start out with here.
Of the 20th century. It is that the vast majority of near 1 billion human beings have been convinced that human nature in some of its darkest recesses can be changed if change is necessary. China knows, as no other people know, to what depths human meanness can go. I used to weep for American Negroes as I saw through what indignities and repressions and cruelties they had passed. But as I read Chinese history in these last months and had it explained to me stripped of Anglo-Saxon lies, I know no depths of Negro slavery in America which have plumbed such abysses as the Chinese have seen for 2,000 years. They have seen starvation and murder, rape and prostitution, sale and slavery of children, and religion cloaked in opium and gin for converting the heathen. This oppression and contempt came not only from Tartars and Mongolians and British, French, Germans, and Americans, but from Chinese themselves, from mandarins and warlords, from capitalists and murdering thieves like Chiang Kai-shek, from Kuomintang socialism, and intellectuals educated abroad.
Good morning, folks. It's Dean from Community Church of Boston, and this promises to be just an exceptionally wonderful morning. We celebrate W.E.B. Du Bois on this last Sunday in February. Every year we do this with a special address. This year we also happen to have and be presenting live on internet, on YouTube, a recording of Du Bois when he last spoke at Community Church, November 1st, 1959. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can find this recording and listen to all the entire 32 minutes of it, as well as another segment of question and answer. And we're just very glad to finally be bringing this to the world. It came from a reel-to-reel. It was digitized. And for the occasion of this, our W.E.B. Du Bois address, we have put it on our YouTube channel. As far as we know, it's the first time it's been publicly available, and it's a very important one because it's 1959, after he had made an extensive trip through the Soviet Union and China, and these were his impressions. And it is also during that time when the U.S. Confiscated his passport and his travel situation was all up in the air. So that's what we wanted to start with, just a little bit of Du Bois speaking at Community Church in 1959. Welcome, everybody. I want to start by saying hello to a whole bunch of you who have signed in on Zoom as well as on our YouTube channel. Spread the word that we are here every Sunday. And to quote the Supremes, someday we'll be together. And I believe that'll be sooner than later, and let's hope that's true. I haven't gotten my vaccinations, but I hope a lot of you have. Many of us, in fact, probably most of us, are within the demographic that we are eligible, if we can get through that silly website or phone message. We're trying. Anyway, Sharon Katz is with us, and we're so glad that she is. She joins us from Tijuana, Mexico, where she is working on just these really impressive cross-border projects. You can see more live of some of that work that she does with her group, the Peace Train, with children on both sides of the border on Sharon's website. Sharon hails from South Africa, and she has this lovely guitar style that brings back the memory to me of Johnny Clegg, who just I was obsessed with in that moment when Mandela was freed. And I found out about his music when he came touring, and he was live on the Esplanade to hundreds of thousands of people. And Johnny Clegg, with this incredible band of dancers, was there. And that little tinkle tinkle guitar style that evokes Ray Peary and Johnny Clegg's band is what Sharon Katz is about. And she has just a wonderful history, and we're just really honored that she can be here, not live. We wanted to have her about a year ago, and it didn't happen for some reason. It was going to be part of our 100th anniversary celebration. But we'll get you and your amazing ensemble eventually, Sharon, and we get a little piece of you in a little rectangle. But we're just so glad you're with us, and welcome to Community Church. We welcome you to this humble stage.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Dean, and good morning, everybody. I'd like to open the program.
I don't hear you yet. Let's see. Why do not
As the guests of the Waldorf
Astoria. Whoa, that's not right.
But the Chinese worker is happy. He has exorcised the great fear that haunts the West.
Sorry, I have to mute that.
The fear of losing his job, the fear of falling sick, the fear of accident.
We could hear her fine.
You can hear her. Okay.
We could.
Take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Dean, and thank you to everybody for inviting me to be a part of this program. It's really an honor to be here with all of you. I would like to open the program with a song that I wrote for Nelson Mandela when he sadly had to transition, and we miss him so much. It's called Hamba Kahle Mandela, which simply means in Zulu or Xhosa, it means go well, Mandela. And it is on my new CD, which is called We Can Be the Change. And I'm very excited to share this with you today. It just felt like the right song that I wanted to share. So thank you so much for this honor. Rest in peace and guide the world. Salakachotso Tata, you have done your work. You led us, oh, you led us, oh. Hambagale Matiba. Rest in peace and guide the world. Salakachotso Tata, now it's our turn. You taught us well. You taught us well. rest in peace and guide the world. Salakachotsotata, you have done your work. You led us all. You led us all. Hambagagle matipa, rest in peace and guide us all. Salakachotsotata, now it's our turn. You taught us well. You taught us well. Thank you.
That's beautiful, Sharon. Sharon Katz, folks. Check out more about Sharon's amazing life of work on her website and her recordings.
You don't have to actually applaud. I mean, just put your hands together and clap.
Now I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted? I just waxed poetic about you, Sharon, and nobody heard. Isn't that sad? That was just a beautiful song, and just thank you for bringing back the memories of Nelson Mandela and what he did for all of humanity. Let's light this candle for Mandela, for Du Bois, for unity of purpose, and for community. If I stood out in the rain night, my only light a candle, 1,000,000 miles away, would you lay down your fire as I raised mine? Would you not kill again? And oh, when you're near me, oh my love, oh my joy, there's nothing ever to weary me. Oh, my darling one. The words from a song by syndicated that I love. Good morning. I want to start by showing off the posters that are behind us. One is our big banner on this side. This side. And the other one is the poster that was in front of our church for a good part of this COVID time, when we were lonely, but there were a lot of people walking by in Copley Square. Both of these are the work of our treasurer of a office manager and publications director, graphic designer, Crystal Rollins Jackson. And it's just such a treat to have her on the staff here, and beautifying our publications and beautifying our space, which right now is quite lonely. We've taken out what we had during the holiday. We had a Zoom bazaar here. It was this room was full of crafts from El Salvador and cloth from Guatemala, and we were doing Zoom sales. Anybody could call up, and I would show them around, and it was actually it was pretty successful sale, $1,500 or so, pretty good. I want to send you to another part of our wall here. Right over there is something we're preparing for a week from tonight. You've heard about Bob Datilio. His picture is there, and his ashes are right next to Bob's photo. And it's underneath a beloved plaque that Bob had a big part in getting to community church. It's a plaque by Gutzon Borglum, the sculptor who is more famous or infamous for Mount Rushmore, that great tribute to American supremacy, or else that great desecration of a sacred mountain. Anyway, we have a Borglum plaque here, and it's a plaque to Sacco and Vanzetti, who are sort of our martyr patron saints. Bob Datilio, who passed away about a month and a half ago, was the preeminent scholar of the Sacco and Vanzetti case, and that was our relationship with him. And this is by way of announcement that next week, March 7th, Sunday, after our service, we will be holding at 2 p.m. Eastern Time a celebration of Bob's life. It will be, there will be a number of wonderful musicians, classical, folk, anarchist hip-hop, quite a selection of music. And also among the speakers, the one that you recognize is Michael Dukakis, who will join us, the former governor and presidential candidate, who was also very interested in the Sacco and Vanzetti case and went back many decades with Bob Datilio. So that's March 7th, a week from today at 2 p.m. Along with, it'll go straight from our Sunday service into the afternoon for Bob's celebration. We had to change the time because there's a bunch of people from Europe, from Italy, who will be joining us, anarchists from Italy and Spain also, who knew Bob from his years and years of loving research on the Sacco and Vanzetti case. We probably will be joined by some descendants of Vanzetti from this town called Torre Maggiore, and a whole bunch of people who reached out to us when they found out that he had passed and that we were having this celebration. I want to tell folks, especially members, but everybody is welcome, about a retreat that we're having on the weekend thereafter, which is Saturday, March 13th, starting at noon. It'll be a Zoom retreat, and it'll be Community Church's thought process around the future of the upper floors of our building. We lost our tenant, who has gone on to bigger and better things. Their name is Theater Offensive, and Irene, by the way, Harold Stewart might be with us today, but he says hello. We were just in conversation with him. Theater Offensive is an organization that promotes LGBTQ performance and theater especially, and they are in the process of opening their own theater and office space in a brand new development that is going up on Boylston Street near the Fenway. It is sad for us to lose them. They've been just an incredible tenant, 10 employees who were on our top floors, and just so simpatico with what we believe in. And we will miss them, and we have to decide about those floors. This will be a space use, agonizing but thinking process about the most beautiful ways that we can use those spaces upstairs here in Copley Square. March 13th, that retreat. It's at noon. Be in touch with us, and we will give you the link to participate in that retreat. I will also tell you that we are taking advantage of our empty, lonely auditorium to do another project. I wish I could turn the laptop around to show you, but there are 4 tables over here, and they are just loaded with maybe 400 cassettes, 50 years of recordings of community church services and events. And we have taken them from our archives that were stored in a broom closet, and we are trying to celebrate them and bring them out into the open and to the public, and hoping to get into a process of digitizing, especially the ones that just stand out. And I'll tell you, this is like sacred work to me. It's just a little cassette that has handwritten on it, Rosa Parks. Can you imagine? And Chomsky, Howard Zinn. There's a bunch of Howard Zinn. Both of them spoke to us many times during the 80s, and most recently, Chomsky, 2015. Lots of other names. Jonathan Kozol. It's a feast. And we're hoping that we can keep the flame alive and be kind of the sacred bearers of this tradition, of this beautiful thing that is community church. I promised that I'd be really brief with the churchy stuff, and I'm done. I've been deeply involved with community church for about 20 years, mostly in the field of music, and then music director, and bringing people like Sharon Katz to you. And that's my favorite part of this job. And I want to welcome back to our humble stage, Sharon Katz, for another tune.
Okay then. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me, everybody? I'm going to give you one of these soulful South African ballad, jazz ballads, sung by the great Miriam Makeba, Dolly Ratebe. I was honored to perform alongside these legends. And this song is called Nchilo Nchilo. It's about a little bird that has a message of peace. Are you all hearing me okay? Thumbs up? Okay. Thank you. Taviliswi quello ncholo takangela tasontela lalisitsho lisithi iliswe livile chilo nchilo yamanti loncholo tavilisui quello ncholo takangela ndasontela lalisitsho lisithi iliswe livile chilo nchilo yamanti loncholo wayembethe nengubo esimhlophe wayembethe nengubo ezimbomvu lalisitsho lisithi iliswe lifile chilo yamanti lonjolo wayembethe nengubo esimhlophe wayembethe nengubo esimbomvu lalisitsho lisithi iliswe lifile chilo yamanti lonjolo takiswi kwelonjolo nakangela nasontela lalisitsho lisithi chilo yamanti lonjolo chilo yamanti lonjolo chilo yamanti Thank you, everybody.
Sharon, thanks so much.
Kakulu, South Africa.
All right.
Thank you.
We are at Community Church, non-sectarian, non-creedal, and we've had ministers from several different denominations, and now we are ministerless, and I call myself the fake minister while we get our act together and figure ourselves out. But I say that to say that we are in the company of a real one. And it's just an incredible pleasure to welcome Reverend Irene Monroe to facilitate the rest of this program. Many of you in Boston know Irene from WGBH and her place on regular place on the Jim and Marjorie program. Some of you might know. I know of her podcast, which is called ALL REV'D UP with Reverend Emmett Price. That is just a wonderful, delightful, hopeful, joyful celebration of African-American religious tradition and music and all kinds of other stuff. Sign up for that podcast. It's a lovely thing. I jump to listening to it every time I see that there's a new one up, and it's just, I was just so glad when Reverend Irene Monroe agreed to come and help us facilitate and have this conversation and with Margaret Kimberley. I want to mention also that Margaret has a specific timeline, has to be done 12:30. So we have exactly an hour to enjoy the two of you and to enjoy Margaret's address. So take it away. Thank you so much for joining us, Irene.
Well, I am absolutely, can you all hear me? I'm hoping you can. I am absolutely delighted to be here. So good morning to you all. Thank you for inviting me to be part of your annual W.E.D. Du Bois lecture. And this year it's W.E.D. Du Bois and the Presidents. And no better person to have this conversation with than Margaret Kimberley. I had the pleasure of talking with Margaret or interviewing Margaret in August. This is when the presidential debate was revving up about her book, Prejudential. And now it's just wonderful to talk about the book in the lens of W.E.D. Du Bois post-election. And all I have to say, more things change, the more they remain the same. But ladies and gentlemen, I have to share a little bit about Margaret and why she's not only a phenomenal woman, but in case she doesn't plug it, go out and get this book. I wish I had read this book growing up, but I did get to read it. And it was very interesting because when I read this book, I had read Brian Lamb's book on the presidents, all 45 presidents. And so I felt like, oh, I know everything there is to know. And then this book landed. And I said, well, no, I don't. So let me tell you a little bit about Margaret Kimberley. Margaret Kimberley is the founder and editor and senior columnist for Black Agenda Report. In addition to her first book, Prejudential, Black America and the President, she is a contributor to the anthologies In Defense of Julian Assange and Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence. Her work has appeared in Counterpunch, Consortium News, Common Dreams, and the Dallas Morning News. Ms. Kimberley worked as an activist, including leadership roles in the Green Eco-Socialist Network, the United National Antiwar Coalition, and the Black Alliance for Peace. She's a graduate of Williams College and lives in New York City. And I think I remember, you're not from Brooklyn. I don't hold it against you because I am, but you're from the city. Good enough here. And I want to say a few things about the book, but I must tell you, if you don't, let me do it again. If you don't get this book, you will do yourself a disservice and not understand how the politics around presidential elections, around the continued disenfranchisement of Black people continue. But Prejudicial is a concise, authoritative exploration of America's relationship with race in Black America through the lens of the presidents who have been elected to represent all of its people. Throughout the history of the United States, numerous presidents have left their legacy as slaveholders, bigots, and inciters of racial violence. And this is an important question that Margaret really highlights, but were the ones generally regarded as more sympathetic to the plight and interests of Black Americans, such as Lincoln, FDR, and Clinton, much better here. And I just have to say this here, and this is a quote from our brother Cornel West here at Harvard, and I have to read this to you because it so aptly depicts your book. He says, Margaret Kimberley gives an intellectual gem of prophetic fire about all of the US presidents and their deep roots in the vicious legacy of white supremacy and predatory capitalism. Such truths seem more than most Americans can bear, but if you ignore her words, you do so at your own peril. So Margaret, we're gonna do it like we did it before. We're gonna lollygag like sister friends and the way Black women lollygag with each other here. But I wanna start here with the preface of your book. It seems apropos. It is a quote from W.E.D. Du Bois that resonates sadly for so many of us today. I'd like to know, what does it say about the people who have been our presidents? That's number one. What does it say about our democracy? That's number two. And number three, your examination of both. How has that shaped your book here? Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, how are you doing? It's
That's
it's an honor to be here. I want to start off by talking about Du Bois. I do have some notes here that I do want to refer to even as we have our conversation. First of all, I want to thank Dean Stevens. It's good to see him, see in quotes, I guess that's, and I want to thank him and the Community Church of Boston for inviting me to give the address this year. And I'm very happy to have another virtual encounter with Reverend Irene Monroe on this day. Of course, we're saying a happy belated birthday to William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, who was born on February 23rd, 1867, and who left this world on August 27, 1963, on the eve of the March on Washington. And it's significant. As you point out, I opened my book with the words from Du Bois in 1956. He wrote an article for The Nation magazine saying he wasn't going to vote. After decades of endorsing candidates and trying to figure out what was best for Black people, he said in 1956, "I shall not go to the polls. I have not registered. I believe that democracy has so far disappeared in the United States that no two evils exist. There's but one evil party with two names, and it will be elected despite all I can do or say." It's interesting to me that 60 years later, there was more semblance of democracy, frankly, I think in the 50s than there is now. We actually have a country which has moved further and further to the right, a country that is with a duopoly devoted to the interests of their donor class, wealthy people and corporations. And we see that happening literally this week, where we see the lack of democracy, where Americans are committed to wanting certain things like an increase in the minimum wage, which has not gone up for years. A federal minimum wage is a paltry $7.25 an hour. And we were told that it couldn't be part of this stimulus bill because the Senate parliamentarian, who I'd never heard of, weighing in on legislation. But now we're told that the people cannot have help. The people cannot get what they want from the system. So I think we're worse off now than we were in Du Bois's day. I think democracy is the last remnants left. Yes, they let us vote, but that's after decisions are made about who can and can't run. And democracy is not in a good state. But Du Bois is one of those very prescient people who told us that many years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting when you say you don't think that we are in a better situation 2021 than certainly in segregated America. But the point is that I always say we never unsegregated, because by the time that Du Bois dies, which is 1963, 1954, we had Brown versus Board of Education, and we still trying to democratize or have educational parity in 2021. So we still got that fight here. But what happened to us with this rollout of integration is that we lost our economic power, our power base. And also, while we had the Green Book, and not the Green Book that movie, because that is a mockery of what the Green Book, and anybody like myself who had to go south and use the Green Book also understood you had to use the Green Book up south, which is New York and even Maine and Vermont here. But one of the things there's a serious tension. There are a number of tensions that Du Bois bring out about presidents here. One of which is Woodrow Wilson. You must tell that story, particularly since there was this debate between Woodrow Wilson and Roosevelt. And the whole idea is that Du Bois gave up a whole lot. He even left the Socialist Party. He got Black people to vote for Woodrow Wilson for him to renege on all the promises. Listen, see, this feels like deja vu, although that's back in the day. All the promises that he had promised for Black America. Please tell us about Woodrow Wilson. And I just need to say, because of his blatant racist policies, I'm so glad to see Black students at Princeton and graduates just insisting that you take the name off of that building. But please tell us, let's start with Woodrow Wilson.
Sure. Well, it's very funny that Du Bois ended up endorsing Wilson, a Democrat. Now let's remember, at that time, the Republican Party was the quote unquote Black People's Party. The Democrats were the party of the segregated South. And ever since the end of the Civil War, those Black people who could vote, Black men in the North, always voted for Republicans and supported McKinley and his Vice President Roosevelt becoming president after McKinley's assassination and when he was reelected. But something happened in 1906 that turned Black people against Roosevelt. A regiment of 25th Army Regiment of Buffalo Soldiers were stationed in Brownsville, Texas. And from the moment they were deployed that summer, they were under attack from the local population who did not want these 167 men in their town. They were accused of committing crimes. They were threatened. The situation was so bad that their commanding officer confined them to their barracks. But that didn't matter. When a white man was shot to death, the troops were blamed. In that November election day, the Republicans depended on Black votes to win a majority in Congress. The very next day, the day after that midterm election, Roosevelt used an executive order to discharge all of those men, depriving them of their pensions, keeping them from working from not only being in the military again, but working in government, ruining their lives. And Black people were furious that this man that they depended on to at least not act like a segregationist, would take this action. There was one Republican, an Ohio senator named Foraker, who spoke up for these men. He was among the few who did. Roosevelt doubled down. He said, it's nobody's business. I don't care if you impeach me. These men are butchers. For good measure, he added in his annual address that December that the primary cause of lynching was rape of white women by Black men. This was simply too much for Black people to take. His successor, Taft, was not much better. No anti-lynching. By the way, there was never any anti-lynching legislation for all the decades that Black people wanted it. And in 1912, Du Bois and other Black people were fed up with the Republicans and their phony support and took a chance and endorsed Wilson. Now Du Bois and others asked him to make a statement in support of civil rights. He made a very mild statement, something about, let me see, I wanted to read it. He said these very mild remarks. He says, quote, assure my colored fellow citizens of my earnest wish to see justice done them in every matter, and not mere grudging justice, but justice executed with liberality and cordial good feeling. Every guarantee of our law, every principle of our Constitution commands this, and our sympathies should also make it easy, unquote. And he added that Black people could count on him for absolute fair dealing. And with these minimal words, Du Bois and others endorsed Wilson. That was a three-way race that year. Taft was the incumbent. Wilson and Roosevelt foolishly tried to get back into politics with his Bull Moose Party. And Wilson won and immediately segregated the federal workforce, among other things. He ended up screening the film Birth of a Nation at the White House. He was horrible. He was the nightmare for Black people at that time. And this is the fallacy of thinking that the electoral process can help Black people. 100 years later, we're still struggling with this, by the way. That we can find someone who is not as bad, and it can be that minimal. We're looking for somebody not as bad. Theodore Roosevelt had shown himself to be a traitor. There was justifiable disgust with the Republicans, but endorsing the likes of Woodrow Wilson was quite obviously not the answer. But it took Du Bois a long time to stop doing that. And he had other ups and downs. He was always an anti-imperialist, but, you know, went against his own beliefs and endorsed what came to be known as World War I and America's involvement in the war around that same time. So I think we have seen the failure of this strategy over so many decades. And one thing we have learned from him and others is that we can't follow this strategy of hoping that there's a supposedly lesser evil to save us.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And, you know, really, Du Bois, we hate to say this because he's such a huge intellectual, and we wouldn't have the concept double consciousness, you know, the souls of Black folks. But one of the things, and I was thinking about Du Bois. I'm always thinking about him because I'm a critic as much as I love him. But I always have to remember one social location. He really grew up here in Great Barrington. I have to tell you, so interesting because there's an idealism, as you had picked up about him. And you know, it's so very interesting. I don't quite get it. And I'll tell you why. Every time I do my Fitbit walks, which I didn't do today, but look forward to after this moment here to get my 10,000 steps in, I walk towards Memorial Drive. So for folks who don't know where I reside in Cambridge, and don't look for me if you're a stalker, but anything, okay? That do happen in this moment. But in trying to get, I always walk down Flag Street. So what is Flag Street? Flag Street is the street. It's the street that Du Bois lived in. There's a house he lived at that has a plaque outside, and you cannot not see it. You know, unlike where Great Barrington, they're still debating whether they should put up a placard for him. But the point is, there's a placard there, and I'm thinking of myself. I'm getting to his idealism. I don't understand his idealism because the reason why he was at Flag Street as a student was because of segregated housing. And so, and he had to. Now, I was at Harvard. Now, I went to Harvard. So he had to buck up and see, it had to be worse than it was now when I was there. He had to buck up against what is called intellectual racism, scientific racism. So the question is, and then the presidents, I mean, we could start with Lincoln to who was Eisenhower, because he dies in 63? Whoever it was, yeah. Okay.
At the time, yeah.
Yeah. What? Help me with this. What was he hoping the presidents could do that in a system that is just designed against us?
You know, I think there's, you know, you can call it optimism. We need optimism and hope, but the desire to believe that our system is going to work for us is very, very strong. Du Bois was also, you know, I think it's fair to say he was an elitist. And having been to Harvard, being a doctor, professor, I think it was probably easier for him to convince himself that these people could not be what they really were. So the end result is him embarrassing himself, actually, in endorsing some of these people and endorsing World War I. So I think that's it. And there's this desire, and because we are always told this is the best world, this is what we're going to have, this is it, this is all. There's this desire to believe that it's going to work for us. And it's important to know about people like Du Bois because it's a long-standing conflict. Actually, I call it just being in denial and hoping that people will do the right thing when they never do.
Yeah.
And it took him a long time, but he did finally get it right. And I think that's a result of him being red baited in the early 50s, actually being charged with being an agent for the Soviet Union. I think having his passport taken, as happened with Paul Robeson, I think those are the things that finally pushed him along. You know, it's the sin of optimism, I guess. You have to have some optimism, but it can't be a denial of reality.
Right, right. And I so agree with you, because one of the things that I continue to argue about is that his elitism is for a number of things. I think the talented 10th is an elitist concept. Because and the reason being, and it showed itself, it manifests itself in many ways. One of which is he forgets his skin privilege. He has a skin privilege. He identified himself not as African American, but the term at that time that he used was mulatto. So it's saying that I got the one drop.
Yeah.
I got the one drop. But the whole thing about it is that, you know, the talented 10th meant that you had a light-skinned ruling class, which, you know, who could pass the brown paper test to get into Howard, or, you know, to get into Spelman, any of the HBCUs. And so he can go any place he wants. There's a level of mobility that he had. And plus he was educated. But I want to get back to some of the good presidents, okay? What did he think about, you know, everybody loved FDR. Work with me, okay? Everybody loved FDR. We know how he turned his back around, you know, Jews in Nazi Germany during that era. But he was supposed to be, you know, the reason why so many of us, meaning Black folks, said, we're going to leave this Republican Party. We're going to get on that FDR train, okay? And ride, you know, that donkey all the way as far as we can. Du Bois and FDR.
Well, he endorsed FDR. Although at the end, the last time FDR ran, he endorsed the progressive candidate Henry Wallace. But FDR seemed like the only game in town. And once again, being a Democrat, FDR was beholden to the Southern segregationists. That was his excuse. I do an anti-lynching bill, but I need the Southerners. I can't have civil rights, legislation. I need the Southerners. And they had Eleanor Roosevelt to help in their public relations. And, and at that time, and I want to be understanding of people at that moment, at that time, Black people we were disappeared. And it was to hear people, my late parents and others of that generation, talk about what it meant for Mary McLeod Bethune to be a friend of Eleanor and to be seen having tea. And she helped Marian Anderson sing at the Lincoln Memorial, right. All of those things. But her husband didn't do anything. The little bit he did, it was because of protest. When A. Philip Randolph threatened a march on Washington during World War II, and there was some very tepid legislation regarding jobs in defense industries, but even that would not have happened had it not been for protest, for people speaking up. So Roosevelt, he changed the presidency. We have to say that, and the Social Security Act, which Bill Clinton undid in the 90s with his welfare reform, by the way. The GI Bill, which many Black people didn't get to take advantage of, because the states anything the states controlled, Black people got screwed. And many Black soldiers never got the benefits they were entitled to. But that was the story. It was more of the same. By that time, the end of Roosevelt, the early 50s, he endorsed the progressive candidates or socialist candidates. But he spoke himself of having to acknowledge the failures of these people and his own failures in continuing to endorse them.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I want to talk about, when we think about Du Bois, we think that he was the only Black intellectual, public intellectual of that era. But there actually were two others, and they were all warring with each other. So we had Booker T. Washington, we had W.E.B. Du Bois, and we had Marcus Garvey. So let's contextualize it a little bit for the audience who may not know or know a little bit. So Booker T. Washington was considered the assimilationist. You know, some would say the good Negro. Okay, Marcus Garvey was considered, quote, the bad Negro. Okay, because he had a whole ship. Say, baby, let's go on back to Africa. You know, and he gives us some of the tenets of Black reliance. We begin to hear a kind of echoing of that. If you're going to worship a God, it would help to have that deity look like us. So he has a kind of radical thought. And then we have the highbrow, you know, W.E.B. Du Bois here and stuff. And all three of them had different relationships with the presidents. Clearly they wanted to deploy Marcus Garvey with his grandiose parades down Harlem that, you know, just riled people up in jubilation. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts looking today at the three of them. Because I walk away thinking, I appreciate them all, because, you know, again, we think people think we're monolith. So you got three strands of Black intellectual thought. Share with me some of your thoughts about it, because, you know, I have to tell you this about Booker T. You know, growing up, I didn't like Booker T, but then I'm thinking, well, you know, yeah, I need, listen, that thing of what is it, 20 acres and a mule. See, my spouse, they have a farm in Virginia that they got during Reconstruction. Her great great grandmother was given that. We're now fighting to keep it because Virginia wants to take it away. Although we got the deed and all of that. So tell me what you think about it. But I do need to say this: being a girl from Brooklyn, I would have gotten on that shit with Marcus Garvey.
Well, you know, it was. There's so much to say there about all of them. Marcus Garvey's appeal was to working class Black people, which made him less appealing to people like Du Bois, let's be honest. Garvey had his failings, but he was not, he was unfairly persecuted and prosecuted by the United States government for a fraud that didn't even exist. He did not ever have a ship that could take Black people anywhere. And that's true, but there was no fraud. And the FBI, there was a young agent named J. Edgar Hoover who took special care to make sure he was convicted, and Garvey was deported to Britain, where he died. He made mistakes like talking to members of the Klan. That was something he should not have done, but he should not have been dismissed either. Booker T. Washington is, I think, far more problematic. Booker T. Washington was the patron king for Black people. He gave his famous speech at the Atlanta Exposition, late 1890s, and basically said that Black people should trade the political protest, any insistence on what was called at the time social equality, that is to say integration, in exchange for getting goodies from government. And the handful of Black people who could get a position or anything from within the Republican Party, everybody had to go through Booker T. Washington. He did very well for himself, financially, but he was then seen, that was very problematic for him to just, at the time when lynch law was at its height, all we need is for X number of people to get good jobs and for philanthropists to give me money for Tuskegee Institute, and everything else is fine. So those were the tensions among those prominent people.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the creation of the NAACP. And you know, it's so interesting because it was such a pivotal institution for many, many years. And now you say the NAACP, people say what? And you know, many of the chapters are, you know, they're not rolling like they did. Certainly, even in the '60s here. Talk a little bit. Let's share a little bit about Du Bois and others developing this seminal, this really institution here, and it's still alive for folks who may not know that we have a chapter here in Boston. What do you have a chapter where you're at, Margaret?
What again? I'm sorry, I was distracted.
I said we have a chapter here in Boston, and do you have one there?
A chapter of, I'm sorry.
The NAACP.
Oh, sure. They're all over the country, obviously. And Du Bois played a seminal role in starting it. But you know, it's an organization we depend on. The Legal Defense Fund has traditionally done and still does a lot of good work. But they are part of it at Black Agenda Report we call the Black political class. Right. And so what happens is they play this role of giving credibility to the people we've talked about who don't do anything for us. They're very much tied to the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. And despite their great history, we have to acknowledge the limits of what organizations like them can offer us. So, so that's the story of the NAACP. I don't want to say they don't do anything. I don't want to dismiss them completely, but especially now when we need more radical solutions, we have to acknowledge their limits.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and The Crisis, the magazine that comes out of that organization was so important here. But can I just say a good thing about the NAACP? I thought I'd never say it, okay? Because I just thought it was tethered to a kind of defunct paradigm of you know, Black liberation and liberation for people of color. I'll never I forget two years ago, 2 summers ago, I was invited along with a number of LGBTQ sort of, you know, leaders or whatever, where the NAACP apologized for its homophobic attitude towards us, the LGBT community. And I said, well, it makes me believe there's a God somewhere, okay? Because the NAACP is certainly church people. And I said, now I'm hoping that the Black church will follow suit. So I think it's trying to step forward into this century here. So that's what I just need to say about the NAACP. And the NAACP here knows me. So every time they're gonna make a decision, they say, you know, Irene Monroe, what you think? So I appreciate, you know, that little bit of inclusion. I want to get back to the presidents here because I am concerned about, you know, Du Bois leaving America, you know, and his sort of dissatisfaction with this whole notion of American democracy, a kind of participatory government, you know, a multicultural democracy. So he's seeing that this is not happening. And if he was alive today, he would see that it's not. But I want to know what you think, what he might have thought about Harry Truman. Now, Harry Truman is interesting. So I'm gonna read this from your book here. You say here, he was openly racist and was a member of the KKK in 1920 when he championed for a local judgeship in Missouri. Now, interesting thing enough, because he's right before Eisenhower, which by that time Du Bois is leaving. He said, I'm out of here. Now, Truman is interesting. He desegregates the army. Now, and the whole idea to think that we had a segregated army fighting the same enemy, okay? It just boggles my mind here. Did he not see that? Because he was doing something that Woodrow Wilson wouldn't do. and Army is one of the ways of really for Black folks back in the day, if not even today, of some form of mobility, social mobility. I mean, Colin Powell wouldn't be where he is today were it not for the desegregation of the Army. Help me with this.
Well, Truman desegregated the Army because he knew he had a close election in 1948. He needed Black votes.
Okay.
So that's the simple answer. That's the quick answer. He needed Black votes for a close election. Now, Eisenhower was opposed to the military being desegregated. But Truman was, you know, he was an unreconstructed grandchild of slaveholders. He, in the early 60s, when the sit-ins began of lunch counters and so forth, he said, if anybody did that, I'd throw them out of my business. And he added for good measure, and you can quote me, this is not a private confidential communication. So, so that's who Truman was. And he, you know, he joined in the attack on Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson did get a meeting with Truman to discuss lynching. And Robeson, being Robeson, didn't back down, and Truman was insulted. And the next thing you know, Robeson loses his passport. Right. So Truman did appear in Harlem because he needed those votes. 1948, right before Election Day, he did appear right here in Harlem, not far from where I live. He was the first president to campaign in Harlem. It was a couple days before Election Day, so he didn't want to be too closely associated with Black people. But thousands of people turned out, and he did win that close election. So we see with him the so-called good for Black people presidents. They do as little as they can get away with, and the little they do is because they're pressed to do it.
Okay, I hear that, right. You know, it reminds me of the way white politicians will show up at Black churches at this hour, okay, asking for our vote, okay. Don't know any Black people, number one. Okay, you know, and they always show up the Sunday before the Tuesday election here and stuff. So yeah, absolutely. I want to push you on one other president, Dwight Eisenhower, because by the time he's up and running, we certainly get a Du Bois that is leaving out of here, and you know, and going to Ghana. You say he's not good. I'm reading from your book. You know, has a reputation that's not good for Black people. But this is what he does. And I want to read this to you. You says here, it's from your book here. And it says here, it is true that he, meaning Eisenhower, completed the desegregation of the armed forces that Truman began. He also desegregated public facilities and schools within the District of Columbia. Okay. And then we go down a couple of sentences, and you say here, in 1954, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell proclaimed that Eisenhower has done more to eliminate discrimination and to restore the Negro to the status of first-class citizenship than any president since Lincoln. And we got to also understand that Eisenhower was president during the landmark Brown versus Education that ended segregation in public facilities here. Can you share more about that? Because I asked you this question because I'm thinking, okay, I'm trying to put on the Du Bois hat. Like, okay. I mean, I like this dude, but look, he's doing some of the stuff that Du Bois asked Woodrow Wilson, and Woodrow Wilson said he would for Black people. Help me with this.
Well, you know, it's a funny thing about, you know, that quote from Powell is funny. What hyperbole, you know, link Eisenhower for real? You know, Eisenhower didn't even like the Brown v. Board of Education decision. He dragged his feet. First, the court decided they dragged their feet. Finally, they had to be dragged into place. They had to implement. So there had to be another Supreme Court decision implementing Brown v. Board of Ed. Eisenhower's people were like, can't we get out of it? Do we have to file a brief? Do we have to say anything? It was quite terrible. But so that's where we are. That, and people, excuse me, like Powell, you know, these politicians, this Black political class is an old thing, trying to take advantage where they could and say someone is wonderful when they're not. And so there's a lot of people we have to really ignore when they say things like that. It's a sad story of that goes back to Du Bois endorsing Woodrow Wilson. And then we end up with someone like Eisenhower. He was the first president to actually hire a Black person in a somewhat significant position, Fred Morrow, but then he ignored him. He barely recognized him, never spoke to him. So that's the kind of thing that we were dealing with all these years. So that's where we were then and where we still are with those people that, and it's hard. I know it's hard for people. I feel like the killjoy, frankly, for having people like this president was good for Black people. This guy, he wasn't so bad. And then I come and, you know, give you
you just blow the lid here. You know, you disabuse us of our, you know, of our notions here and stuff. I got one more president I want to ask you about, and then I want to segue to Pan-Africanism and then open it up certainly for folks who are on the call here. So I'm not going to talk about Clinton because he just pimped Black people. Okay. I'm done. Okay. We don't need, and we definitely don't need to talk about Trump. Okay. That's just on. Okay. We've been there, done that. We saw this. His twin is Andrew Jackson. Is it Andrew or yeah, it's Andrew. So, you know, but I want to ask you, I want you to help political imagination here. Help me. What would you think? What would be the critique or praises or both that Du Bois would have about Obama? Work with me here with this one.
Well, you know, it's always, it's a little dicey trying to figure out what people would have said at a certain time. You know, every King birthday, it's like Martin Luther King would have said this or that or thought this or that. We don't know, because we saw Du Bois succumb. We saw him succumb to being a socialist, to, you know, believing in Woodrow Wilson. So we don't know what he would have done. I think the sight of a Black president just turned things upside down for so many people we already saw it. There were people who were right on and radical, and then they were like, oh, Obama can win, so let's give him a pass and don't complain. So Du Bois could have been like that too. Had he, you know, by the time he, you know, was basically forced out of the country.
Right.
So who knows what he would have said. I think the important thing is, what do we say?
Yeah.
Having lived through these times and seen these people.
All right. Well, this is my sort of Pan-African kind of question. So in the 1960s here, we're beginning to see a lot of the Black African countries gain their independence. We see the Congo, we see Ghana, Nigeria. Unfortunately, Sharon Katz, South Africa is still struggling. Okay, you have to say amen on that one. It was still struggling at that point here. So at this point, he's seeing, you know, Black independence in a way that we've just never seen in such a way here. Help me to understand how he may have seen that as a panacea, or okay, let me use this metaphor. See moving to Ghana as the promised land.
Well, he was one who championed the cause of African countries. He initially opposed what we now call World War I, because he correctly saw it as a scramble, an imperial competition, that Germany and Britain and France were fighting over access to resources. Germany had African colonies in what's now Namibia and what's now Tanzania. So he was always pro-African, always. And he saw this hope in these countries becoming independent. They're still not really independent. It's very sad, but the forces of capital and so these African nations are still controlled by people with money in New York and Paris and London, and we have to say, with the help of although we should say, even though there are African despots, they are kept in power by the people I mentioned in Europe and the US. But he saw hope, and Ghana was a new nation. It was the first nation to gain independence from a European colonizer. So it makes sense that that's where he ended up. Although, and I hope that people who watch this take the time to listen to the audio recordings of Du Bois that are on the Community Church of Boston website. I realized I'd never heard his voice before. And he spoke very eloquently about the hope for decolonizing and his admiration for socialist society. So that was his hope, Pan-Africanism and socialism.
Okay. Listen, you know, Margaret, I'm glad that I get a second chance to talk with you, because I you know, not enough of my questions, you know, get answered here. I hope that there'll be a conversation with sort of frame like MLK and the presidents and bring you in, you know, so we could talk more about LBJ, Kennedy, and some of the other presidents that we didn't hit, and also Lincoln, because King evokes Lincoln a lot here. But, you know, given, you know, that we're strapped for time and certainly want to bring in questions from the audience.
I would like to do some.
Yeah, I want to say thank you, but I want to say this to folks here. Please, I want to put it in the frame. I'm shameless, Margaret, but you know, ministers know how to sell something here.
Yes, please. Yes, I do the same thing. I'll do it all. I'll join you here.
Okay, yeah. Please get this book here and stuff. So let's open it up for questions here. Dean, I don't know how you want to do it. I'm looking in the chat, but that doesn't mean people don't have questions. So,
well, we want to, we realize Margaret has to be out of here and on to another Zoom by 12:30. So let's go, if this is okay for you, Sharon, can we have your last song at 12:30 after we say goodbye and thank you so much to Margaret? Would that be all right? Okay, so why don't you all just take it away, and let me say that I was going to have my copy of Prejudential here, but the post office hasn't delivered it yet. It's on order, and we hope that we can have it signed in person by you someday soon, Margaret. And this is just so rich and such a wonderful history lesson, and it just so ties in with all these cassettes I have in front of me in the history of this church, which is a very rich thing, and which has delved deep into matters of race in America during the 100 years of mostly 20th century that we've been here. So I want to just, Irene, folks, if you would like to put your questions in the chat, yeah. Or there's also a little thingy here that you can raise your hand and you get put. I see that Mike Heichman already figured out that little thingy. And Mike, will you unmute yourself? Yeah, you're unmuted. Go ahead, Mike. And Irene, from here, will you take it and just...
Oh, okay, definitely. I'd be more than glad. I'm honored to do so.
11 more minutes of Margaret. And
yes, please.
Your time limits, Margaret. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
So thank you to both of you, and also thank you for plugging the book. But I also want to plug Black Agenda Report and encourage people in this congregation to subscribe to that wonderful periodical that comes out every week. I've been a member for a number of years, that group, including you, Margaret, are strongly in terms of supporting Black independence, very supportive of the Green Party. I'm with the Green Party. 57% of white people voted for Biden, and I'm sorry, for Trump. And it's only because of the support of Black people and brown people that we have a new president. Good news is Trump is gone. Bad news is that Biden's the president. Yeah. The problem is like, where do we go from here? It's like, how do we break the cycle? I know that your work in Black Agenda Report and Jambo Baraka and all those wonderful people in the Green Party, it's like we're so tiny, deliberately by the system, of course. But how do we go to the next step? One of my thoughts is that the Green Party needs to reach out to other forces that have been talking about building a new independent political party. What do you think? How do we go about promoting meaningful progressive politics?
Well, that's a question. That's something I am involved in personally. I also became a member of the Green Party. Ironically, I always voted after a certain time. I was like Du Bois. I said enough. I can't vote for the imperialist neoliberal party anymore, and officially registered as a Green here in New York State, although Cuomo just knocked the Greens off the ballot as they're doing in other places. But I think it's important for us to build a strong left party. The Democrats are not the left party. They are, we've seen this in the last few weeks. No minimum wage, no $2,000. Did we say 2,000? It's 600 minus 2,000. It's really 1,400. Yeah, we're still going to bomb Libya. Syria. We have to build a strong left party, but people, there's so much fear among, not just among Black people, but among everyone, and especially with Trump. You know, Trump really, he really broke the system. People ended up voting for Biden who didn't have to in states like Massachusetts, where you are, New York, where I am. I know people who, they didn't even do the safe states strategy. I would say to people, you don't have to vote for him, but the Trumpian nightmare was so strong. But I think it is very, very important for us to build real left parties and leave the Democrats behind once and for all, because all we get is bait and switch and a lot of BS if we don't.
All right. Yeah, I got to say amen to that. Mike, thank you for your question. I see Alan with his hand up. Alan, you're mute. Okay, good. I can't hear you. Can others hear Alan? Maybe it's just me. Okay.
No, Alan, keep trying to unmute yourself. Alan.
I can't hear Alan.
Can we go on to someone else? And
yeah, I think
if there isn't somebody else waiting, and we'll get to Alan since you did.
Okay, I don't see a hand raised, but if there's someone else that has a question, please unmute yourself. And yes, I see Charlie. Okay, thank you, Charlie.
Hi, I was just, when you were talking about the different Black leaders, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had a presentation about Hubert Harrison, and I wanted to get your take on him.
Oh, well, an unknown, largely unknown man, Jeffrey Perry, has made it his life's work to bring his very existence to light. He was a socialist, very active here in Harlem in the 20s and 30s. And I urge everyone to learn about Hubert Harrison and other people who were always on the left, always unapologetically on the left. You know, one of the horrible leaders of the political class, Congressman Clyburn, said, "I don't know any socialists." Well, my response is you need to widen your social circle, because there are plenty of Black socialists. And of course he would say that in order to, you know, diminish and the attraction that Black people, if left to our own devices, would have in being attracted to that political ideology.
All right, thank you. Alan, are you ready? He says 1 second, okay.
We're not getting Alan, but I see that Tilly Ruth has her hand up.
Okay.
Well, in Boston, we had the communist Bill Harrison, who was the first Black Rhodes Scholar, Harvard University, and he was the editor of the weekly, the Boston Chronicle, until his death. This is currently, we have the Banner, but Bill died about a year before the Banner. When he died, then they started the Banner. But my piece is about Du Bois. Is a couple of years ago, I ran across his novel. I love novels, The Silver Fleece.
You wrote too.
And I just wanted to say that the way he examined Black-white social relations and how people were donating to educate, etc., but that that one was a mind blog. And by the way, I saw Du Bois here at Community Church.
Whoa. Wow. I'm not familiar with his novels, but I mean, how many people can write scholarly tracts and write great histories like his History of Reconstruction and novels? Obviously, a Renaissance man. Alan, I really do have a drop dead 12:30. Are you ready, Alan? Can you put in the chat? I hate to keep ignoring you. No.
Alan, you're muted now. Can you unmute yourself? And maybe we could, okay. No, I don't, maybe it's me.
The mic is not working on Alan's end.
Okay, can you unmic yourself and talk into the machine where no, you can't, okay.
Margaret.
All right, I was trying, because he was, he said he wanted to ask a question.
We got Joan, but it has to be quick because Margaret's out of here at 12:30, 3 minutes.
Okay. Can you hear it now? Can you hear me?
Yes, quickly.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a long question. You've got to wait.
Sure.
I'm interested in the invention.
So who's on? Okay. So thank you to our guests. My name's Alan. I'm a member here at church, and I.
Go ahead.
So anyway, I have two questions. Margaret, first I want to say I've been a member of Black Agenda Report for a couple of years. Really enjoy it. The one criticism I have of you is I think you're too tame sometimes. Maybe too diplomatic or something, but that's okay. So I have two questions. One is about your book, The Two Presidents, JFK and Jimmy Carter. Both Democrats, of course, but both presidents who didn't have extended second terms or whatever, kind of forced out one way or the other. And briefly, if you can just say a little bit about them. I like to think Jimmy Carter would be more radical if he could put limits on himself, perhaps.
Well,
my other question is about the book Green Book, the movie Green Book. And I want to tell you, I saw the movie in China and with some young people and surrounded a theater full of Chinese people. And when we look at the movie sometimes that way, or is a really basic message about the United States, clearly it's much worse than the movie portrays things. There's one scene in the movie where the musician, I forget his name, but he's in the car and he's among the sharecroppers in the South, and it's cinematically it's very simplistic sort of, but it's a very, to me, a very important social and political dynamic.
I interrupt you because I have to leave it in like
about how elitism works, and I just wonder if you can talk about the movie a little bit.
I did not see it. I know the
criticism
of his surviving relatives hated the movie, so I'm going to go with them. I'm going to trust Irene as well. As for Jimmy Carter, he was a very conservative man, and he lived up to that as president. Another man who made many racist statements during the campaign.
Thank you.
And I have to go. I thank you for being a supporter of Black Agenda Report, and I'm so sorry that I have to go. but I really do have to do this other thing. Thank you all. Thank you. Sending love. God bless you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Margaret. And how about a song from Sharon? One last song. This is that we also remind everybody that community church needs your support. We depend on you to keep these wonderful programs going and to keep this building up and running without duct tape and glue and paper clips. So there's several ways you can contribute. Our website will allow you to do this with a credit card or PayPal, or you can also send a check to us, 565 Boylston Street. The zip code is 02116. We'll put this on the chat. And by way of thank you again, Sharon Katz, we're so glad you could join us this morning. And how about one last song? And Irene, if you're able to stay with us for a little more chat, that would be wonderful. And if you need to go, we're fine too.
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to just, for the last song, share a song that I wrote back in 1992 when we were working towards the election of Nelson Mandela. And yes, it took an awful long time to dismantle the brutal apartheid regime in South Africa. And our work is not done. There's still a lot of work to be done at home. But I wrote this song for 500 children of all races to sing together. And it's called The Time Is Right Today. Maibuyi Africa, which means Africa is back. I went around to schools all around the city of Durban, South African KwaZulu-Natal, which at that time there was a civil war going on in the country with all different parties trying to vie for power and, of course, to overthrow the apartheid government, which did eventually happen. And so children of all different races learning to say Maibuyi Africa was really, really important at that time, and was important to me to try and get that message across. And it's amazing that still today we have to sing this song all around the world. Time is right today. Maibuyi Africa. The time is right today. Maibuyi Africa. The world is changing and the time is right to walk together into the lights. It's time for changing and rearranging. We've got to sing together, black, brown, white. The time is right today. Maibuyi Africa. The time is right today. Maibuyi Africa. We do not work for nothing, sisters. Now it's time to right those wrongs. We do not work for nothing, brothers. We have been waiting too long. The time is right today. Maibuyi Africa. The time is right today. Maibuyi Africa. Yakala njalo endaba mawethu. Oh, yakala njalo endaba mawethu. Oh, yakala njalo endaba mawethu. Oh, yakala njalo endaba mawethu. The time is right today. Maibuyi Africa. Maibuyi Africa. Maibuyi Africa. Uyi Africa, Africa. Thank you, ngiyabonga. Nkosi kakhulu. Gracias, muchas gracias. Thank you for having me here today.
Remarkable.
An amazing conversation, really powerful. Thank you so much, Reverend Irene, and everybody that attended. It was Margaret. The conversation between you and Margaret was very moving.
Yes.
I don't want to hog any more time here, but just to say that yes, I grew up under the brutality of the South African apartheid government. And I've just learned so much more since being in the United States about the whole conversation, which is continuing conversation that needs to be had. And it was a privilege to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon.
Oh.
This is just remarkable. And Reverend Irene, thank you as well. If there's one or two last observations or questions, we'd love to do that. And we'd also just love to have you back for a sermon or a talk, whatever. Sometime, the sooner the better, say I.
Yes.
Your game.
Many eyes.
Joan, go ahead, Joan. I know that you had your hand up.
Yep, it's kind of a long issue. This is the shortest month, and it's also called Black History Month, which annoys me. Africans were here, quote unquote, before Columbus. Everyone was. And Alex Haley, when he made Roots, was not allowed to mention, they wanted us to show the slave ships, not allowed to mention that before Europeans were here, Africans were all over the hemisphere, people of many different colors. So natives, the alien Irish, the number of slaveries is high, coolies. To focus on one group is a mistake because actually Danny Haiphong, who was a local activist, wrote a book on American exceptionalism in which he recommends the book, The Invention of the White Race, which is 2 volumes. And I have been going down all these different alleys about the effect of the Crusades on that. 1492, Spain and Portugal begin expelling Jews and Moors. Moors, not a skin color, it's a religion, Muslims, right? And so it interests me over time how many slaveries there have been, including native, for each of these presidents through Lincoln. They all had a terrific history of being quote unquote Indian killers. You know, the first occupants of the hemisphere get called Indian because of a papal bull. But natives included people from Africa, you know, way BCE. And that should be recognized. And the producers of Roots didn't let Haley cover that. It seems to me unfortunate that before European invasion, before the invention of the white race, you can't discover a fully occupied hemisphere, right? So there's a discovery method too, but I've been spending a lot of time on, you know, why that's a whitewashing. Also, the media often start Black Lives Matter with George Floyd, which is it started in 2014 when both Barack and Biden called them domestic terrorists and called for law and order. So people starting with George Floyd are leaving out the reaction of our first mulatto president to Black Lives Matter. He was not good for Black people. What he did to Africa was ridiculous. So I agree with everyone who thinks we should all go green. In 2008, it was the first woman, the first African-American, Cynthia McKinney. I vote on the issues, not on, and she ran green. So happens to be an African-American woman. So.
Okay, so your question, it's expansive, but let me give a stab at it. Let me say a few things at this here. First of all, I want to say to all of you, in case we get in an engaged conversation and then have to get off, I want to thank you all very much for having me be with you on this particular important anniversary here, and to have this kind of conversation with you all. I said to Dean, I said, I feel, when I got the invitation, I was ecstatic, and then I was also embarrassed because most Sundays I'm preoccupied, which is why I have never been to the church. But theologically and politically, you folks definitely resonate with me. Non-creedal, non-sectarian. It's like, okay, we can have a real adult kind of conversation and worship that doesn't harm anybody, but if anything, embodies who we are and room to grow. There's no staticness there. But all that's to say, a tsunami of thanks to you all for having me. Now to try to get to Joan's question, and forgive me if I don't get it. You know, one of the things that we are in a inflection point, quote, reckoning moment for white folks, okay? Because the killing of George Floyd is nothing new to Black life. What makes it new is so many white folks are horrified by it. It certainly affirms what we've been saying since 1619 when we were dragged up here on these shores here and stuff. Modern technology has helped us tremendously to broadcast the kind of atrocities here in America, the pinnacle of American democracy. You know, when we had television, quote unquote, we got to see the civil rights movement. We were horrified by what we saw, but you go like, you know, so like, oh, okay. And then of course now with so many of us with cell phones or some sort of one of these smartphones, we in many ways, good ways and bad ways, police behavior. I have to say that because we do have white people still calling cops on Black folks, whether they're in Central Park bird watching, Starbucks waiting for some friends, or your Professor Henry Louis Gates trying to get into your house. So that's to say that. But one of the things I always say that in this reckoning moment here, that we don't have to repeat some of the lies of that we've been celebrating. Like for instance, we need to, and Cambridge is in a unique place to do so because it is a progressive state of sorts. It doesn't need to celebrate Columbus Day in the way it has historically, in a way that it doesn't dismiss the pride that Italian Americans have. It's not to diminish that, but to put Columbus in his right place. One was that he was directionally challenged, but that's another story. Or the way in which we do Thanksgiving. You know, it's a day of mourning. It's a beginning of a genocide of a people, but it doesn't have to stop us from celebrating how we get with our families, okay? But recognizing the truth here. You know, I always say this, you know, when we talk about white supremacy, you know, the thing that was very, very interesting, you know, Donald Trump gets elected. And I say to my friends are they're all progressive, white friends, right? And they say, I'm not going home this Thanksgiving. And I keep telling them, if you can't talk to your folks, you know I can't. I said that this here is a kind of civil war that doesn't have a north-south southern boundary. When we think about, you know, the civil rights movement and white racism, we think it is the province of the South. And I always tell people, if you're below the Mason-Dixon line, you're down South, and if you're above it, up South. And I think Joan sent me something about, because we had, Margaret and I had hit on Brown versus Board of Education. I think, Joan, you told me that we never had, you know, a busing, you know, we never had really the kind of integration that busing was supposed to bring. But this is what I say to white folks when I'm in a predominantly white audience. When I do anti-racism work, there are two central questions I ask you, so please remember these. One is, how are you white? And number two is, how white are you? So when I ask these questions, and I'll be very short because I know there'll be many other questions following here. When I ask you, I mean, when I ask you, how are you white, we're talking about various ways that white privilege allows you. See, you can go and sit in Starbucks, not even buy a coffee, okay? Not even buy a coffee, and you won't be questioned. You can have trouble trying to get into your house, and people will know that's your house, you know. So you got white privilege here, and what we understand about race is that it is a social construction, but it has material reality. So when I ask you, how white are you? This is what I'm asking you. When did you get your white card? And I call this the conceptual trap of whiteness. And what I mean by this is that when did the Italians become white? When did the Irish become white? When did the Jews become white? Because there was a time in this country you would see a placard in a store that says, no Jews, no N-word, no dogs, or no Italians, no N-word. The consistent thing was always Black people, no dogs. And so what I'm saying is that when we think about the term ethnicity, we have color coded to mean just people of color. But what has happened is that white folks have bought into this notion of what I call homogenized whiteness, not understanding, depending on your white ethnicity, has a lot to do about how much white privilege you're going to really have. Money has nothing to do with it, okay? Because when we look at anti-Semitism, you know, we got to understand that doesn't matter if you are a Jewish person of means or no means, you're being discriminated against, even though you got white skin privilege because you are Jewish. And so I think that when you parse out that kind of understanding, and I always say this is very interesting, we always say that one of the most segregated hours in America is 11 o'clock. And we only see it in Black and white terms, but the truth is, who goes to the Catholic Church? Who goes to the Reformed Church? Who goes to the Episcopal Church? Those are particular ethnicities. I mean, we mix a little more, but I mean, and of course we put class in it too. But the point about it is the church knew who you were, who you are. It's very, very interesting. So there's things that we can do. And I think that when you parse out that question, it gives you more authenticity to know your history, because if you don't know your history, you're dangerous. It gives you the kind of coalition building that you want to do around what I call intersectional activism. I'm not saying that because I'm a Black person, that, or if you're a white person and say you're a woman, that you don't have a commonality with me. You do, but your language and your positionality in terms of how you talk with me talks about a kind of egalitarianism that begins to bring that not only intersectional activism, but the kind of work that needs to be done to shift the paradigm to a more co-equal movement forward. I'm long-winded, you know, listen, I'm a Black minister now, so look, what can I say? Okay, you're gonna get a long answer. Please, any other questions?
I had one.
Marilyn,
yeah, can you hear me?
Hi, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is my Virgin flight on Zoom video. So I wasn't sure why it kept saying that the host would not allow me. But anyway, thank you so much for your work and for Glenn's work. You two are the people I turn to when I really want to know what's going on. And I refer everybody else I know to Black Agenda Report. I was wondering, I just had your opinion on a couple of things. Like, this may be a little bit off topic, but I was wondering what you thought about Theodore William Allen's book, The Invention of the White Race. And I also wondered what you thought about, I think it's Les Page, who's done the most recent bio on Malcolm. Is it The Dead Are Rising or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have real mixed feelings about that book. I learned so much, but I have a feeling that I like Malcolm more than he did. But, and then I was looking at my book, Jeff Perry's book on Herbert Harrison last night, and I found this little note and that I'd written in there, and I don't know, I don't remember this. I'm 82 and I'm forgetting everything. But I had a little note in here about Du Bois working with the military intelligence and encouraging Blacks to just forget about lynching and disenfranchisement. That must have come out of Perry's comments or his talk about Harrison. So if you have an opinion on any of those things, I love your opinions. I've been listening to them really gratefully today. So anything you might want to say on any of those ones.
Okay.
Mary Lynn, just wanted to clarify real quickly that Margaret Kimberley had to get off the call, but we certainly do still have Irene with us. And if
right, I'm sorry, that was my mistake. This is the senile 82-year-old.
That's all right. And thanks, Mary Lynn. I'm really glad that you're on the Zoom. And
I'm not sure I am, because I had the.
You are on the Zoom. I see you and I hear you. So congratulations. Go ahead.
Thank you,
Reverend Monroe.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much here again. Let's talk about Malcolm first here. You know, we're going to continue to get more insight into Malcolm, some real and imagined. Some I need to say that there are two good books that I particularly like. The original one, the autobiography of Malcolm X. But you know, it comes out at a time that we begin to get the first layer of this you know, iconic image here. I like I like Manning Marable's work on it, because I like his writings in general. I'm very partial to Manning Marable. If he had sort of landed a job, you know, at the time that he was moving from institution to institution, my point is I would have studied with him up at Columbia. Clearly I didn't want to leave home, New York, than to come up here to Harvard. And no offense, I mean, I love Cornell and I love Skip Gates and I love them all, okay? But I'm just saying that I would have liked to have studied with Manning Marable. So I say that to say this is my bias here. This one here, I couldn't get through it. I'm sorry, because I go like, huh? Okay, yeah. You know, I go and I go, okay. You know, I'm being very honest with you. So I said, you know, I have to do it in bits and pieces. This is to say, Mary Lynn, the verdict is not out about that one. I just don't know. I got to think about it. But I think I'll finish it. See, Black History Month is a busy month, which I have a problem with. I call it High Black Employment Month for Irene, because, you know, every white person that wants a Black person to speak, you know, and then the rollout of Black History Month, something that I think that Joe might have been getting at, that is the rollout of Black History Month is really for white consumption. It's really not for Black people. And I think it's always trying to prove that we are human, we're talented, you know, all of that kind of stuff. But I'm long-winded, so I want to get to. So your question about Du Bois and the FBI here, there have been, do I have that right, Mary Lynn?
They said he had a real connection with military intelligence. And at the same time, he was also encouraging Blacks to forget about disenfranchisement and lynching, not to make those issues.
Well, let me just say this, and I've heard some rumors about this, but let me hit the anti-lynching thing here. We almost passed an anti-lynching bill in 2020. This was around the time that John Lewis had passed away. Rand Paul blocked that. The issue, and the last lynching we really had was with James Byrd in 1998. It was called lynching by dragging. This was in Jasper, Texas, if you recall here. He was dragged to his death by some white guys in a pickup truck. Let me say this. Let me tell you why the anti-lynching bill is not going to get passed until we do. We need to do a domestic bill, really, a domestic bill, a domestic terrorist bill. Because if we have a domestic terrorist bill, then we could put under that rubric lynching and other types of domestic terrorism that we as Americans face, like January 6th. Okay, really, they call it insurrection, all sorts of things here. But Black folks who know Klan behavior, okay, know what we have another name for that. But so I've heard stuff that Du Bois didn't think that we needed that. But I always say this: he grew up here, Barrington, Great Barrington. He had white skin privilege. He made sure to comport himself like a what I would call an Afro-Saxon. He wasn't the everyday type of person. So there is something about mimicking white culture that gives you somewhat of a pass, particularly if you're lighter skin or whatever, talk very proper, than if you don't. I mean, I was the head teaching fellow for Reverend Peter Gomes for a decade. This is when I was at Harvard. And, you know, when I think about it, I'm working on a book about him, a biography. When I think about him, it's like, okay, you grew up in Plymouth, and white people can make space for an exceptional, for one or two blacks. He didn't live in a black neighborhood. You know what I mean? Neither, you know, Du Bois. So it has a lot to do with where you live and whether you are encroaching on what is conceived to be white space. You got, look, one or two black families, what kind of clout do they have? If, you know, and the community dictates that they be more assimilationist than be themselves. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I've enjoyed talking about this topic.
Thank you.
And anyone else?
Welcome to Zoom, and thank you so much for the question and conversation. Hey, we're getting on 1 o'clock, and this has been rich. So glad that Irene and Margaret and Sharon joined us. I want to just run down what's coming up at the church. This is our newsletter, came out about 2 weeks ago. Next Sunday, we have Susan Pearlstein talking about creativity is ageless. She's way into people telling their stories and oral histories and memoirs. And we have music that day by Karen Klein, who's a poet and dancer. She was actually with us on the call today. Are you still? I think she checked out. Yeah, Karen Klein. That's March 7th. March 14th is a program about Puerto Rico, and it's Amilcar Antonio Barreto from Northeastern University. Music by Soli Canto, my friends Brian and Rosie Amador. Later in the month, we have Ben Norton, from journalist from the Gray Zone Project. It brings us up to speed on the left in Latin America, and he's also got a podcast just like Irene does, and you should check out his, which is called Moderate Radicals. That's a little bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? But we'll have Ben Norton explain that to us. And the last one in March is John Bach, who is, many of us know and love John Bach very well. He is from Friends Meeting and many other places. I've known John for 30 years, and he's my direct connection to radical activism. And music that day by Joyce Katzberg, that lovely songwriter and activist from Providence, Rhode Island. That's a little bit of what's coming up. Also, a film, March 21st, Gaza Fights for Freedom, is Abby Martin's film. Abby is not doing her regular correspondent thing because she has a newborn, but she's agreed to join us. This is her footage from what was called the Great March of Liberation 2 years ago in Gaza. And it's not an easy thing to watch, but it's there, and Abby will be here to comment on the film. That's March 16th. A lot of great stuff. It's on our website and on our Facebook page. Join us again if you can. Irene, thank you for joining us, and Sharon and Margaret, we're just so grateful, and we will be in touch. And just remember the words of Elma Lewis: give light and people will find a way. Give light and people will find a way. Give light and people will find a way. People will find a way, I do believe. Teach peace and people will find a way. Teach peace and people will find a way.
People will find a way.
People will find a way. People will find a way, I do believe. Stand together and people will find a way. Stand together and people will find a way. Stand together and people will find a way. People will find a way, I do believe. And we declare the meeting to be over. We'll see you all soon. Be in touch. Do good work. Make progress. We love you.
All right. The love is reciprocal.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Jose. Bye, Mary.
Bye. Bye, Dean. Bye, everyone.
We love you.
Joan, Kevin, Dorothy, Dick Crowley, so glad you're with us. Jim Casteras from New Hampshire. Alan and Lenny from Maine. Pat and Barry Warner. Talk to you soon. Hasta luego. Goodbye. Ciao.
Hasta luego.